afternoon, everyone. My name is Latika Pai. This is the third of our series of webinars about building products that consumers love. This one is actually particularly interesting as a third part, which is why do great products fail? Right, you come up with an idea, and why do products fail? And today with us we have a fantastic panel. We have Walid from Egypt, founder of PaySky. We have Mustafa, who's the founder of Roar. We have Ankit, who's been with a couple of venture capital firms, Axel being one of them, who's invested in products that have not necessarily taken off, and Vinayak, who is the CTO for Microsoft for Startups, whose background is fantastic. Most recently he was the CTO of Zoomcar. Before I start the webinar, I would like to thank my partners here, Prajeet, Kishan, and Suresh from BOV Capital, and Randula and Suresh from Hatch, and Prajeet and Krishan from BOV Capital. I am particularly invested in the Sri Lankan startup ecosystem. I've spent a lot of time there. I believe, it's nascent, but there are some really, really promising startups, and together we want to make sure that we actually scale these startups. And for those of you who know, Microsoft for Startups is running the Highway to 100 Unicorns, where we are looking to engage with the top 5 to 8 startups from Sri Lanka to be a part of this. This is something that we're doing across 16 countries. So founders who are out there, if you need more information, please do check with the BOV Capital or with Hatch. They have all the details. Over to Prajeet, GP at BOV Capital, for him to introduce himself and BOV Capital.
Thank you, Latika. Good evening, everyone, and welcome aboard. This program that we have created to ensure that we give startups a boost in terms of understanding about user love. Just to give you a bit of a background of BOV Capital, we started in 2009, just after the war ended in Sri Lanka. We are a Singapore, Sri Lanka-based venture capital company, and we've been investing in startups since then. But our core focus has been building the ecosystem in Sri Lanka, because it never existed for the last over the 30-year war period. So since 2009, Rajan and myself have been building this ecosystem, and over the years, we've created the Angel Network, and today we have an angel fund in Sri Lanka, which runs separately for seed funding. And BOV Capital was created as a venture capital fund, a proper venture capital fund, in 2016. Since then, we've been investing in we've invested in about 12 companies, and still working towards flourishing the Lankan ecosystem and ensuring the startups go global in some way or the other. And today we have 6 of our portfolio companies based out of Singapore, and 2 in India, and the rest in Sri Lanka. So I'll stop with that and hand over to Latika again. Thank you.
Thanks, Prajeet. I'm, like I said, I'm very fortunate to work closely with BOV Capital and the Sri Lankan startup ecosystem. Randula is the CEO of Hatch. Like I was mentioning to the other panelists, it's one of the coolest co-working spaces, not just because of the building in which, the heritage building in which it exists, but also I think in terms of the kind of support that they give the community that resides within Hatch, right? It's not just a real estate space, but they do a great job in terms of ensuring startups get the support in terms of mentoring and access to others outside of Sri Lanka. Arandula, if you would like to mention, a few words about Hatch, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Latika, and good evening to the panel, and good evening, everybody, to everybody who's connecting in on our live streams. It's a great pleasure to be partnering on this series. I think this is the third chapter of the series of this topic that we're really bringing to you. And like Latika very correctly mentioned, Hatch is working very closely with the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Sri Lanka, not just and only as a co-working space. That's just one element to our model. We're an acceleration and incubator space in Colombo and Jaffna, and we have multifaceted programs that really facilitates and generates supports to companies at different levels and different stages. We are just coming out of a fintech accelerator that worked with 8 fintech companies in Sri Lanka, which kicked off during COVID and concluded soon after the lockdown really opened up. So very, very proud of the achievements that we've had there with the fintech companies. And apart from that, we have another accelerator program as well as 3 other incubator programs. And all of this work we've brought together with all of the experience our founders and our partners like BOV Capital, Lankan Angel Network, and all of our other ecosystem partners really brings on board as well. And in the time period that Hatch has been in existence, that is for a little over 2 years, we have done all of this work and have extended mentor network over 60 plus mentors across international and local platforms. And we've supported over 300 startups through all of our programs and our spaces available in Colombo and Jaffna. And we are actually in the process of setting up a similar model in our neighboring countries in Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. So very much looking forward to working together closely with our partners like Microsoft and BOV to expand our impact and support more and more companies to grow better and bigger and make a deeper impact in the region. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Latika again.
And thank you so much, Randula. So over to our topic today is to, why do products fail? And I think I was just thinking about some of the great products out there that we had a lot of hope for. One, of course, was Google Glass. I think billions of dollars in research. The glass was, was built. Clear run up to the launch of the glass. I know I tried to be one of those who could actually do the demo and try it on, but I wasn't one of the selected few. And I was talking to someone who actually was in Barcelona and during mobile world, and he said he tried it on, and he said it was crazy. It had this Star Wars kind of feel. But really what happened then was that this he had splitting headaches wearing it for more than a few minutes. So when I read about it, the reality as to why Google Glass failed was that they never actually someone came in, built it, thought it was the next best thing to sliced bread, but they didn't really get the average user feedback as to why what they were looking for and whether they really wanted something that was what is cool in Star Wars may not be cool really on a daily basis, right? That really was the learning from that. And of course, Google being Google, $1 billion or whatever number of dollars that they spend, they could afford to. But as founders and entrepreneurs who are building products, I think we all have limited funds in terms of what we need to do. We need to be careful. We need to learn as to why products fail. And that's why we have today this panel of both founders, investors, and a CTO. So let me start with Walid. Walid, thank you so much. He has joined us from Cairo. He's part of the Microsoft for Startups program. Walid, you come, from a background where you worked with the Visa, and now you've started PaySky. So if you could please tell us what PaySky, does. What has been your journey? Did you have a moment where you were building your product out when you realized, this is not going to fly, and you had to kind of pivot on the fly, right? Because I think that's something that we all have to be careful about, that you don't do a complete rollout and then realize it's not going to fly. So it'd be great to know more about you. And again, thank you for being here from Cairo. You're on mute, Walid.
My pleasure. Thank you, Latika. Basically, I come from the payments background. I've been in the payment space for the past 16 years. I used to lead innovations for the Middle East and Africa. from Cairo and Dubai, and then I moved with visa to London to manage a strategy for CEMEA region, that's Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And from there, it was obvious that there was a massive change in this payments ecosystem, whereby the digital disruptors like Paytm, Alipay, WeChat Pay, and the likes were disintermediating financial institutions completely from the financial transactions value chain. So I saw this as an opportunity. I left Visa to build the transformation bridge, digital transformation bridge, if you will, for financial institutions in order for them to obtain the latest and greatest technologies on the digital front without having to invest individually in building them one by one. So built our proposition around two folds. The first one is an omni-channel payment gateway that supports payments across all possible interaction channels from as many as possible payment methods. And on the other hand, we have enabled that enables businesses and financial institutions. The other fold is basically a consumer proposition, whereby we are enabling the consumers with a payment method in a form of a card plus app proposition. And again, we have capitalized on the existing rails and existing infrastructure of financial institutions. We didn't come up with a new proprietary wallet in order to maintain the momentum that they've already started. And of course, gain the support of the multi-billion-dollar budgets that they have for marketing, as well as the backing of regulators, which is very essential in developing markets because regulators can influence a lot of things. We started the model basically in a B2B offering. Our model initially was a B2B model, whereby we were providing our platform as a payment, as a service, basically, payment platform as a service for financial institutions. Worked out beautifully in the first year. 5 out of 6 acquiring banks signed up to our platform for card processing, 7 out of 8 for digital processing. The Egyptian Post and even the central bank adopted our platform as the national payment gateway of Egypt. So we built a Rolls-Royce engine, but it was still parked in a garage. Banks were not doing their effort to use this engine, and it's as good as nothing if it's not being used. So we had to pivot at this point, and we have to change our model a bit to set a model, set an example in the market that using this kind of a full-fledged standalone, all-inclusive platform can change the way acquiring services and payment acceptance happens on that market. And we applied for a merchant aggregation license from the central bank. We got that. In the first 9 months, we obtained 10% market share of the acquiring business that was built over the past 20 years. We have built that in 9 months. That started to open up the eyes of the banks and the regulators of what is happening in that space. How could such a small company make such an impact in such a short time? So, of course, banks thought of it their way. So they came to us trying to acquire PaySky instead of actually learning from the model. They just buy them and then run for us. But then again, we politely said no because it was still too early for such an exercise. But they started to work on the platform in a different way now. They know that the digital methods can yield. And moreover, that actually started to encourage non-financial institutions to come into the play. So we've got totally new banks in the acquiring space, just totally relying on our platform to do acquiring. And they have actually also disrupted the waters in that space in a big way. Totally powered by our platform, not developing any codes inside. And we have also 2 telecom operators now operating on our platform out of 3 in Egypt. So they became a digital financial service provider powered by our platform. So the trick here was that changing the market dynamics commercially by showing them that a fully managed service can change the dynamics of the market, and digital can change the conventional way of doing business. Has actually induced and changed the mindset of the banks to behave in a different way. Likewise, doing this became, again, now one of our 3 pillars of doing business. So we have now the platform as a service continuing as it is. We start to expand to other markets and launch more and more products, but we continue to do the merchant aggregation. 1, it's a very good catalyst to keep the whole momentum maintained by the banks. 2, it gets us now a total different set of insights. So previously in a B2B model, our customers were banks, right? So we were getting their feedback, their needs and their requirements from where they saw the market going. But now we can touch the final end customer and interpret what they really need in a total different way than how the banks translate that to us. And there was obvious syndrome of solving the wrong problem issue there. Banks were trying to solve the wrong problems. Banks were looking for a set of solutions and services to make their business grow. Banks were trying to push their financial services product and get the money of these businesses with them. So they were not meeting, and banks and merchants did not see any value in adopting the bank's products. By touching the merchant, we could actually reach insights of what they want. And when we go back to the banks now and offer them a solution that sells, they would sell more. They would buy more from us. And that was really also a very good insight in building the right product for the right customer.
So you just managed to kind of pivot, and I do know that COVID has probably helped in getting the banks, which take forever to move, to kind of adopt going digital sooner than later. So great. Thanks, Walid, for those insights. Vinayak, you've been a CTO and for several companies, and I know you've been a part of several successful startups. Most recently at Zoomcar, and before that you built the entire team for Akamai out in India. What has been your observations? Today you're the CTO for Microsoft for Startups. You work with several startups. You and I have been, we kind of know in many ways, if someone is really building out, like Walid said, that the Rolls-Royce platform, which no one is going to use, right? What's most important is how do you build a product that consumers will love and it doesn't fail. So what has your experience been so far in the startups that you worked with as to why something failed?
I think, there are multiple reasons why, products can fail. Off the top of my mind, distribution is one, pricing is another. Not having the right feature set could be another. So I'll quote an example from the business that we launched at Zoomcar. So what happened at Zoomcar is that we were looking, we had a car rental, which was going on very well. And we said, hey, let us look at the other end of the equation. Let us start building out the cycles business, which we called Pedal. And what we did initially, we iterated a little bit. We started off in Bangalore. We saw, we got all the technology right, the IoT, locking, unlocking remotely. We had a fallback between Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So all of that worked beautifully. But when we actually launched it, we saw that, different cities, people were using it in very different ways, right? Some were using it for errands. Some of it were getting used for delivery. Some of it was getting used for commutes. So we had to actually plan our pricing in different ways. What we also realized so one of the classic mistakes we did is we kind of spread out to 10 cities, right? We saw that, did it across 10 cities. And what problem that created is one of the biggest issues that we realized as soon as we did that is any kind of point-to-point solution for transportation works really well when you have density, right? And what we actually reduced the number of cities that we did it. We actually were and increased the density and figured out how to connect it. So there was a lot of data science involved. There was a lot of data collection involved in that. But just having distribution doesn't help in this particular business. Density was very, very important. And availability was very important. And then we actually, used maps and used a lot of different things to figure out, why were the people taking trips from, how are they actually moving between, different points. And that actually helped refine the product. But because of some of these mistakes that we did initially, and while we perfected the technology and other things, that worked really well. But the biggest challenge was the unit economics, right? The unit economics is such that initially you need to actually do a lot of capital investment into the product and then kind of subsidize and then slowly raise the price. But the challenge is you don't know what is the right price point for a service like this, right? Because there wasn't service like this before, and what price point people would pay would be very difficult. And the challenge also in India in terms of pricing is also, do you for example, bundle it create a pass, or do you bundle it along with, other modes of transport? So that was not very clear. And while we were doing that, it became very hard to sustain a business because we couldn't get the unit economics in time in the runway that we had. And eventually we had to kind of Though from a technology point of view, it worked really well, but from a product and a business point of view, we weren't able to actually get the unique economics right because of the various factors that we did. So that was unfortunately a failure, and we had to kind of shut down the product.
That's interesting. Now, for example, we have Bounce, right, who is doing something similar, and has raised a lot of money. So clearly, one of the reasons why products fail, I think, is when you are ahead. So watching and waiting, and seeing someone fail and then picking it up is not probably a bad idea in terms of making it viable. Ankit, I'm going to go over to you right now. On that particular topic, right? You saw Zoomcar start with, being very successful in renting cars and try to get into the bicycle into the bike space, and failed. And one would think that it would be an easier progression to move from cars to bikes. But today you have Bounce that has succeeded and is doing well. What have you seen during your investment days when you have made investments into startups, or what have been areas that you believe have succeeded when you were kind of skeptical versus some great products that that you betted on really didn't take off? What has been your experience?
Right. Sure, Latika. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. And to address your question, I think there are two key reasons why startups fail or the products fail to launch and do well in the market. I think one of the most important reasons is the market opportunity itself. So giving your example of Zoomcar as well as Bounce, how both of the startups looked at the market opportunity, as well as the timing of the launch of the startup itself. So I think one of the key reasons or key places where startups end up committing a mistake is not to understand what the need gap is in the market. So once you identify the need gap, where is the pain point for the customer, and you're able to build a product which kind of provides a solution to that pain point or need gap which exists in the market, and you can augment it with a consumer experience which is as seamless as, let's say, what Uber was able to do or what Swiggy and Zomato have been able to do in food delivery. That's where you get a higher retention from the customer. The consumer delight kicks in, and that leads to a higher retention, which leads to conversion rates as well as monetization possibilities. The problem ends up happening is a lot of times you don't achieve the product market fit and you've launched the product. You haven't done enough understanding of what the consumer segments are, what the consumer wants, who is the target consumer. Some of the points which Vinayak mentioned, right, from pricing, design aspect, bunch of other things, they're all valid. But I think most places where the startups end up going wrong is not doing that initial bit of market research to understand the market landscape. The other thing is some of the products, as I said, the timing bit of it is also very, very important. So if you look at telemedicine, for an example, if you look at the last decade, we've seen 3 to 4 generations of telemedicine startups that had come in, but none of them actually really picked up in the market. And it was essentially a timing bit. The need gap was there, but the consumer behavior wasn't really there to come online and access the service. It took actually a pandemic to really change that consumer behavior. And during the last 9 months, and I'm sure you're aware of this, the telemedicine consultation that was 300% of what it was pre-COVID. So I think 2-3 factors which are relevant here. I think one is also very important to understand the consumer behavior and how that is evolving, and if it is the right time to actually launch that product and if the consumers will use that product.
Latika, if I may just quickly add to the Zoomcar story. So though Pedal itself was not a success, much of the technology and understanding of the user was actually really useful when we launched the electric two-wheeler. So it actually used the same backend, and the understanding of product. But what we did differently in that sense was we targeted the B2B customers a lot more, and that actually helped us actually make it self-sustaining. Also, the price point was kind of kept at a much higher point, because what we realize is it is harder to change the pricing once consumer kind of get used to it, right? So I think both those learnings actually from the failed product were actually helpful in launching the next product that we launched in the line.
Over to you, Mustafa. Mustafa and I were on a call this afternoon and earlier this afternoon, and it was really phenomenal to know that he has Roar, the company that he started, has over 2 million folks who are subscribers in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and over 1,000 pieces of content is being created every month, which I think is outstanding. I'd mentioned to him that it's, in today's WhatsApp world, right, and social media world, you have absolutely no idea who has created the content. In fact, an anecdote was last evening, my husband, he writes weekly for the Mint, and this man reads a lot, sends us a WhatsApp message saying that there's going to be crazy rains in Bangalore, never before you've seen it. Come home. I was outside. All of us were brought home. And then, there were rains, but nothing major. So then we asked him, where did you read this? So he said, I got a WhatsApp message. And, my daughter and I immediately kind of pounced on him and said, you shouldn't be believing in WhatsApp, and anybody can write anything and send out. So for some, for a company like Roar to be roaring, I would say, in terms of the kind of subscribers that they have today. It would be great to understand, Mustafa, you mentioned that you had actually expanded into India and you had done Hindi content and realized that that was not something that your consumers really needed or loved. So, and you had to kind of maybe pull back from it. So it'd be great to understand your story as to what was your thinking in terms of building this product out, multilingual, coming into India, and why did you pull back? Because and how expensive was that in terms of that strategy, right? Did it throw you back 6 months or it didn't? It would be great to understand that.
Thanks, Latika. And so our story goes back, I think, 2014. We started Grow because of the simple premise that Sri Lanka didn't have good enough content. Before 2014, I was studying in the States and always wanted to really understand what was going on in Sri Lanka. What are the new developments? The war had just ended. There was a lot of exciting things going on from 2019 to 2013, and we weren't really able to understand what was going on in the market because there wasn't any good content publications. The only thing that was available was either news or gossip. And that's the reason we started Row. We thought that there is a lot of great content that we can speak about. And when we just started, it was only in English. And for the first 2 years, it was just English. And we then realized that if we, the English users, thought we had very less content, what about the vernacular content? Millions of people are coming online for the first time, and they don't have access to 99% of the internet, because most of the content out there is either English or some other language that's not their own. So we experimented with Sinhala, which is the Sri Lankan native language, and it was phenomenally successful. The amount of traction we got was really, really inspiring, which then led us to continue to invest into growing our local language publications. And then eventually we assumed that there was the similar need in Bangladesh because the market dynamics are very similar. It's a vernacular market. Many millions of new people are coming online for the first time looking for good content. And we didn't have a lot of user research, nothing at all. We just hired a couple of freelancers and tried it out, and it was super successful. And we scaled up from there. We should have done a little more research before going into India. A lot of people cautioned us into it, but I guess we tried that out. We thought let's experiment and see. And we tried to do Hindi content, tried for 2 years, but I wouldn't say a great amount of cash, but at least a little bit of money in India. We tried many different things over there, but unfortunately it didn't work. The hyper-thesis that we had in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh was just not true in India. There was plenty of good content. And just going back to, say, from a product standpoint, I think user research is very important. It's very important to understand what are the problems users have. We started Row because we had this problem of not having good enough content, and then made assumptions and went on from there. But it's very important before jumping in, building products, to really understand what's the problem we're trying to solve. And great products are built on solving problems. So just another quick example as to one area where we went wrong was 2 years ago, we redid our entire tech stack. So we built a completely JavaScript-based tech stack. And unfortunately, the target users we had were users who use very low-powered smartphones. And because of that, most of our technology was not accessible to them. What they needed was a very simple, plain HTML version of the website that they could access with any smartphone. So it's very important for user research. I think that's something I learned the hard way, to really understand what's the problem the users are having, what you're trying to solve for, and then work backwards from there.
Thank you, Mustafa. You actually bring up a very good point, because I keep thinking about that perfect product life cycle. I've been actually part of early in my career, part of consulting companies, building out customer care and billing systems. Average contract size was about $100 million, and it was amazing how at least more than 50% of them were never deployed, right? Because that was the time when you had these huge projects, hundreds and hundreds of us. And today, of course, as a result, this was customer care and billing systems for telcos. Today, of course, every part of it, you have a separate separate application that is being developed. The whole concept of iterative development, prototyping, getting that user feedback early on is something that's very important. And Vinayak, this is where probably, from a tech perspective, right? How do you prevent building what Walid mentioned, that Rolls-Royce product that nobody is going to land up adopting? And you've spent not just money building it out. Time is the most precious also in terms of entrepreneur's journey. What are some of the suggestions when you come to from a technology perspective in terms of giving direction? Because many founders who come in, they may the CTO may not be as I would say knowledgeable. You've been around the block, you've done it, you've learned it, you've got great experience. So what would you do, to kind of give advice to young founders, young CTOs as to how they should be careful about navigating, not doing what Mustafa just mentioned, which is creating this platform in Java when they should have come in with a rather lighter version of it?
Yeah, so I think compared to earlier, I agree with you that I also been working in the industry for some time. Yes, people used to build out a lot of stuff, but multiple things have changed. Right? Now there's a cloud, so you don't have to pay for the infrastructure, you don't have to pay for servers. The front-end frameworks have also become much easier, right? And what I've seen over the past few years, and at least some of the founders are doing really well, is they build like a high fidelity prototype and actually see how users actually use them, and they do this not just with the users, but they also do if it is a B2B app, they actually co-build and co-develop it with maybe some of the early adopter customers, right? So that works like really well. And what that does is that you may not have a full-fledged product, but it actually stops you if you have a high fidelity prototype. It actually, or even a design, it actually, like for example, how the flow should look, what should the responses be. It actually gives a sense of how the product how the product should be developed. Because what when you're building a completely new category or a completely new product, many times the customer also has a problem in mind, and but doesn't know how the solution would look like. And this kind of comes, how midway you can actually meet midway and figure out, does this look like what the solution is? Obviously, I mean, product being, and I keep saying this all the time to founders as well, product is an exercise in curation, right? So there has to be some kind of thought process, some kind of, I would say, point of view that is expressed, right? Let's say there are two fintech companies that are having exactly the same problem, but when they build products, actually they will have different set of features, they will have different set of customers. And that is because the one is that the founders understanding of the product, what kind of customer are they looking for, right? So you have to curate it, and that curation can happen by having this constant iteration with the customer. And I've seen that high fidelity products building out small prototypes, rather than like typically, especially I see with younger CTOs, they want to build this like big and shiny and highly scalable architecture, but most of the time I think quick and dirty does it. And once you have traction, you should in some sense plan for a rewrite. I know it is very, very unpopular and contrarian advice, but at least you kind of build to get to one stage, validate the thesis. Once you know where it is actually gaining traction, I think different parts of your architecture, different parts of your product will get fleshed out. A great example is something like Flickr, right? A lot of people don't know. Flickr is, for those of you who don't know, is like a photo sharing and app, which is like pre-Instagram. I think nowadays everybody uses Instagram, but yeah, the Instagram of the early world. But it actually started off as a place where people could. The founders wanted to build a game, and they found that people were actually using the app and a platform to actually share photos, and they pivoted there, right? So you can find a market by accident, and that market can be really huge. And you have to give enough leeway when you build out a product for that to happen, which means that even from a psychological point of view, that there is sunk cost fallacy, right? So you have to be nimble and build at least minimum level of veneer or depth, and then as the product becomes larger, you can add more and more depth and more features. I think that is probably what I would kind of talk to founders a lot.
So what Vinayak, you are actually suggesting is that forget about the Rolls Royce, get the simple version, make it get user adoption, and then figure out where, plan on investing additional funds in terms of building out the full-blown product. So that's really what you're recommending. Walid, you have so many streams going on right now, right? Every time I speak to you, I get anxious, but clearly you know what you're doing, because it's working in your market. Because again, here in a market like India, which is more mature, one of the things that Vinayak and I are constantly telling founders is, don't go after market grabbing, right? Like, don't try and be everything to everyone. Become, be more focused, go deeper, do one thing really well. But PaySky is B2B, B2C, B2B2C, right? So there's a lot of balls that you're juggling right now in terms of coming out with a product that is there. Where do you see yourself going in these three parallel streams, or do you see yourself at some point maybe focusing on saying, we're going to be working with the B2B, we're not going to go into B2B, B2B2C, and B2C, right? So that will be interesting, because that is a recipe for disaster, right? So just would like to understand, how has that worked for you, and what is your point on that?
A very, very valid point. Very valid point. Doing too much or biting more than you can swallow can shock you, basically. But there are two aspects to how and why we decided to do what we're doing now. The first one is that there is minimal distraction in doing both, simply because we have already built the platform, we have matured the platform, so the core engine is there. It's just the commercialization aspect that is different now. So when we run it on behalf of banks, it becomes a platform offering. but we run it on behalf of our merchants, then it becomes our B2C offering. So basically, we are not really distracting ourselves in running multiple systems or multiple solutions. It's only this, it's the same solution, but a different commercialization mode. The second dimension is when we come up with new use cases for B2B and B2C, it's basically building on a very flexible modular architecture whereby we are reusing the same building blocks, the same cubes, basically, to build the shapes that we want. When we go to the when we went to the UE market already, we have used this exact same system, but with a different configuration so that it suits the local regulation. So building the product modularly with the flexibility and agility to reshape it for the market requirements saves a lot of time of customization and having to rebuild after you go live. That is one aspect. Of course, being cloud, and I wouldn't be talking about Microsoft and the help of being cloud and running on Azure, helped us a lot and just having this portability and universality in offering our solution. So that was also one of the key answers of how we could manage to run a B2C and B2B offering, scaling easily without having to rebuild systems and do in-house solutions and so on. And finally, the last point I would like to add on this is, in mature markets, you can commercially afford to stick to one vertical. In less mature markets, the critical mass of business that you can realize to keep your business sustained from one vertical might not be realized. This has killed a lot of startups, a lot of products in the market. Some of them are really good, actually. So the diversity, although very tedious and very hard to handle, helps in actually giving you the alternative revenue stream that can sustain you when the first or the second one kind of have an issue. In our scenario, although the B2B offering in a sense creates competition by enabling banks to have a similar solution to what we're offering to our merchants, but it gives us licensing fees and steady income that supports us in the turbulent times. For example, when the COVID came, there was a lockdown. So the steady income from the B2B model sustained the company till we resumed our B2C activities. So it comes at a cost, but also has its own merit.
No, I agree with you. I mean, like I said, in all my beat has been the emerging markets, right? In the Middle East and in Southeast Asia, and I see that. In emerging markets, it's all it's like literally, 4 companies all come into one in terms of what you're trying to do. But you're right, so it's interesting to see that your approach has been to make sure your tech based platform is solid, that you can then build off of that, which is, it isn't 2 separate products, but more a product that is thing. But again, I think as you grow, it's going to be, you'll have to make it 2 completely separate products, 2 separate product, leads for that. Ankit, over to you, because from an investor perspective, right? You've probably seen hundreds and hundreds of business plans come your way, startups who are looking for funding from you, etc. What have you seen as an investment philosophy, right? In terms of, have you seen that when you've invested in companies that are very focused, when they are kind of going deep, that those are the ones that are less likely to fail, or the ones that have gone? Have you seen any patterns there? Because it'd be interesting, to understand, right? What were some of the bets that you knew that you took in hindsight? Maybe that was not what you should have done. So I think, again, since most of our audience is from the emerging markets, what would you as an investor advise?
Right. So I think, again, as an investor, I think as an early stage, growth stage investor, a couple of things which we really look at. One key is the market opportunity itself, the TAM. So there are 2 ways to look at the TAM. Either you can go and invest in a segment which has a very large market, where there are a lot of consumers, the TAM is really large, whereas the order size or the transaction size or the AOV, which we call it, maybe on the lower side. But that's the low-hanging fruit. And that the perfect example there would be ride-hailing as a segment, or food delivery as a segment, or e-commerce when it first came in with Flipkart in India, at least. So that's one segment. The other is either you go in a very focused market, a very niche, where you're building for a very niche audience, and you are building a product which kind of captures the bulk of the market, and you are creating a kind of a go-to premium product for the audience. So Book My Show in India would be one such example. So Book My Show, when the first investment happened in Book My Show, it wasn't really a large market. I mean, of course, keeping the COVID circumstances aside, which has completely disrupted the the movie-going audience right now. But pre-COVID, I think Book My Show was a small market when the first investment was made, right? But it created a product which was far superior and far more premium, and because of which it could capture a large market share, and there was ability to build on top of that customer base. If you talk about the other extreme, which is a really large market, let's say ride-hailing or food delivery, like I mentioned. So in food delivery, for example, if you look at it, both the demand and the supply side was very, very fragmented. The frequency of orders was really, really high, whereas the average order value may be on the lower side. So it allowed you to capture a larger customer base. And once you've reached a certain critical point, you can build multiple business models on top of it, which we are seeing right now, both Zomato and Swiggy are doing in India, right? Whether it be the cloud kitchen model on top of it, private label, or some of the, venturing into adjacent verticals like pharmacy delivery and a bunch of other things. So to address your question, I think it really depends on the segment you're in, the kind of price points you are catering to, the kind of customer persona that you're catering to. The feature set also evolves with time as you venture into new categories, as new users come into the system, or as the new users' needs and wants evolve as you enter in new geographies. So it keeps adding on to that, the product.
Thanks, Ankit. I think that's very good feedback. That you start with one and then you go broader, and sometimes you're lucky, and sometimes you never know where you go. Mustafa, coming back to to Roar, right? Again, you've now post your Hindi Delhi. I wouldn't say fiasco, but learning that you shouldn't be in a market like that. You said you work with 4 languages now in Sri Lanka and in Bangladesh, right? What is the opportunity right now? Do you see yourself being going after a dozen vernacular languages, or maybe using the same content, converting it? Do you see there is a need for saying, as you keep going to each market based on the language, and the norms, the kind of content that is being asked for is not necessarily the same? So it's not a question of saying, if I've got it in Sinhalese, I'm going to change it into another language, right? So what is your focus? Because now is your time. You've got 2 million subscribers. That's phenomenal for a small country like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Of course, the opportunity is large. What are your plans in terms of creating a product where you go from 2 to 10 million to 20 million subscribers?
Thanks, Latika. So you're right. The content does not scale. I think that's something that we've learned over years. Content has to be highly localized to the national level, or actually even the regional level, and on the language level. So out of the 4 languages, we have 3 are in Sri Lanka. So even Sri Lanka itself is split up into 3 different languages, and the content required for every region is very different. So it's you can't really take one piece of content and make it fit to all these different markets. And that's something that we've been really thinking about the last 1 year. Like, where do we grow from here? We always had plans to scale up to other markets, maybe Myanmar, Cambodia, Pakistan. We always had those plans. But for the last 1 year, given all our traction in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, our focus is to make sure that we grow within these current markets. So Bangladesh, I think there are anywhere between 60 to 80 million internet users, and we're only tapping into about 1.3 million of them. So there is huge space for growth in Bangladesh. Sri Lanka has about 8 to 9 million internet users, and we're tapping into about 700,000 of them. So again, there is a lot of room for growth. Another really interesting thing that we've learned is to I think someone mentioned it here. I think it was Ankit. You have to go after the niches. Niches are very important. One area where we thought we could have done better was our content's a bit too broad, right? It's trying to really serve everyone, but unfortunately, then it's not very useful to anyone. It's not super important to anyone. But the moment you start going into the niches, that's when you can build community, and that's when monetization becomes, or that's when I would say users really start to love your product. So I think building something a little too general is also something that you should stay away from. You should look at a very focused target group, but also you need to look at how you can scale it and grow it in the future. It can't be too small where it's very limited. But I think niches is something that's very important to focus on.
Great, thank you. For those in the audience, if you'd like to ask any questions to the panelists, please put that into the chat window. We'd be happy to answer. And while we're waiting for questions, I'm just going to give each one of the panelists 2 minutes to talk about not their startup, and we've heard about their journey or in their investment philosophy, about a product that they loved and doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to go first with the BlackBerry, right? I love the BlackBerry. It was, I could type in my sleep, with the BlackBerry, and I didn't have to look at the QWERTY keyboard, and I could just say I could really type in, and it was so important. And to think that the BlackBerry, that was something that I knew how to do, blindfolded, doesn't exist anymore. Is a product that I love that doesn't is no longer there. And it was a great example of being a multi-billion-dollar firm that is just even if it exists I did see one actually. It was almost like looking at a dinosaur. Somebody had a BlackBerry a couple of weeks ago, and I went there like, wow, you still use the BlackBerry? They said, yeah, we're not going to give that up. And I know that when BlackBerry came up with trying to be a smartphone, copy what Sony was doing, and the Apple was doing, etc. They should have just stuck to being a BlackBerry, right? For email, and they just didn't get the ergonomics right. So that was a product that I love that doesn't exist anymore, and very interesting to see how they were right up there one day, and then a few years later doesn't exist. So it'd be great if each one of you all can share that anecdotal information with the audience. Vinayak, go.
I think it would be this small Nokia phone. I think 1110. It was like really small, fit in your pocket, did one thing and did that really well, which was like get you to talk to people. Nowadays, I find that I use a smartphone, but I use it for everything else but like talking. So I kind of miss the simplicity of having the phone and that device just doing what it did. Plus the ruggedness, right? You don't have to kind of hold on to your phone like it's like my precious. So I miss that kind of it was a really good product, did one thing well, and it was rugged, and it was really good to use. Yeah, so maybe some of the Nokia phones. I hope Nokia comes back.
Okay, great. Walid?
Sorry, Latika, come again.
So, is there a product that you love to use which doesn't exist anymore? Maybe something locally in the Middle East, in Egypt, that you believe that great potential and today doesn't exist. So mine was the BlackBerry that I was addicted to, and Vinayak mentioned the Nokia phone that could fit into his pocket. So just again, ending this session where we talk about building products that users love, but then they failed, right? So
that's a very tough question, because by design, well, if they love it, would survive. The failure points would most probably be picked up by another a competitor and build on it. So I think the market is very quickly self-healing on that front as we speak. So it's very tough to find a product that was not replaced properly. Frankly, I wouldn't miss the old Nokias. I think the smartphones now add a lot, add a lot of functions. Even Blackberries. I was actually were magic when they came out, but the BlackBerry Storm, if you remember, when they started to do the touch screen ones, was really miserable.
The minute they went into touchscreen, that was where that feature just was the one that I think started it was the beginning of the end for that. Ankit, what about you? Were there any products, or even not a product that you personally use, etc., but a company that you believe was out there going great, and then boom, it crashed?
So I'd just like to take that conversation forward with what Vinayak mentioned, right? Like with respect to the size of the phone. I don't know if you guys experience this now, but since the smartphone wave has caught up, there are very few small size phones which offer the same feature set and the same consumer experience. So I think iPhone has recently launched a new product in that category, particularly to cater to the audience who wants a smaller phone, but offers the same feature set with. So I used to love iPhone 5S at one point in time. And that's been because it's very comfortable to carry and comfortable to take around, as well as offers the same smartphone experience which most of the other phones offer. So just wanted to add that bit there with respect to the phone. And with respect to the product, I think with some of the product which I miss, I think one of the companies that we invested in was building an app which would essentially be a smart notification manager on your phone. So what it does, the vision for the product at least was to, make the app AI smart enough to tell when you're walking into a meeting, and by default it will put your phone on a vibration mode or a silent mode, and accumulate all the notifications throughout the day and push it forward to you at a time when you are free. And all of this it'll do at a back end, looking into your calendar, reading into your phone usage, the real estate usage on your phone. I think that was a great product. I think it was ahead of its time. There was another similar product in the US which was built. I think it was called Snowball or something. I'm not sure about the name. So that was one product which I would have loved to see become a success. I think YC also had done a follow-on financing in that product. But yeah, I think it was, like I said earlier, it's a timing bit. I think it was a little ahead of its time, as well as did not feel like such a strong need gap for the regular user in the market. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Ankit. Mustafa, last one. We have 2 minutes to go. Was there any product that you loved that you hoped that it would take off and it didn't, or it took off and then it crashed, or is there a company that you had startup that you had engaged with that you believed had great market potential and failed?
I think my example would be Flappy Birds. I don't know if everyone here remembers the game. But Flappy Birds was a game, came out, I think, 2014, 2013, was widely popular. It was, everyone was playing Flappy Birds at that time. It was the game to be playing. And it was developed by this indie hacker who wants to be independent, just creates games because they love to create games, but not to become rich or famous. And this game had become widely popular, and he was making about $50,000 a day in ad revenue. And what was really sad was, I think 2-3 weeks into the game going viral, he shut the game down. So he deleted it from the App Store. So I was really not too keen on the game, but I was very keen to see if he hadn't shut it down, where would it have gone? I think if you look at the comparables, you have Angry Birds, which became a massive franchise. They have movies, they have merchandise and multiple types of games, apps, etc. And then you have also Zynga, which was a gaming company at that time. it makes me sad as an entrepreneur to see that so much potential going down the drain. And that's what I'd like to share.
So there's one question for all the panelists. We're close to our time, but I'm just going to check with each one of you. Maybe one line responses. The question is, how do great products stay relevant when tech, design, and consumer tastes change rapidly, right? Typically, the product life cycles are planned 9 months in advance. And 9 months, you can make a baby, but the 9 months today is far too much to kind of plan anything out. So, Vinayak, your response. Again, the question is, how do great products stay relevant when tech, design, and consumer tastes change rapidly?
Yeah, so I think, the most obvious answer is, as Ankit said, is like revisiting the product market fit and also having fast iteration cycles of what works and what doesn't work. But to do all of that, I think you need the entrepreneur and the team needs the courage to be able to cannibalize and change their existing product. Right? Often there is a fear that, okay, this is working, why change it? Or, this is actually generating me money. Why should I upset the apple cart? And a great example is, I feel that, Amazon used to sell books and they came up with the Kindle, right? Obviously, they have failed at a lot of other things, so have other companies. But the courage to try something new when you can cannibalize your existing business, I think that is like super important, I think.
Great, thank you, Mustafa.
So yeah, I think pretty much what Vinayak said. I think your product is never complete, right? So you need to keep iterating every day. You got to keep changing. And with that, you keep staying up with the trends. So I think the way we do things is the product's never complete. It's just getting started. So every day is a very iterative process. We look at what can we improve, what's the plans, what's the progress, and it keeps going.
Thanks, Mustafa. Walid?
Consumer and customer channels should always remain open and as active as possible. So engaging with the customers, having continuous focus groups. It's not just before the launch that focus groups should be run. It should be a year-long exercise. We have this in our policy. We always run focus groups on our application because, as you rightly said, tech, design, and consumer tastes change. So we need to stay relevant. We need to stay attractive. So that is one dimension. The second dimension is, again, building the technology on an agile infrastructure with an agile architecture and components so that you can adapt quickly and react quickly to changing trends and technologies and infrastructure. And thirdly, you have to keep an eye on competition because, again, they might be steering the market taste as well in one direction that you can actually forecast and read before they get there. So you can either lead or even take a couple of steps ahead, or at least prepare counteraction. So that is also very relevant. Running, we cannot run in silos. And finally, analytics. Not all the feedback you would get in words from focus groups. You can embed a lot of analytics and data. You can get a lot of data science insights of how users' behavior change, how they interact with every different aspect of the application. If you're in the app space, for example, so how frequently they use this function versus that function, and how that use change over time. That can tell you a lot of insights on how the consumer think of your application behave today.
Great. Yeah, my favorite line is, it's no longer the big eating the small, it's the fast eating the slow, right? Agility is something which is absolutely important. You can't wait for 9 months. And the other part that I always believe is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If for me at the end, it's all about making money. It's not the vanity metrics that matter. It's all about making the money. And so Ankit, last words on, because this is something that you've been on the board of several startups, and wanting to go off track is always not, I would say off track. That's unfair, right? That's being a bit harsh. But wanting to kind of keep adopting and staying relevant, there's so much fear in founders. So when you put your investor hat, how do you kind of calm them down and say it's okay, it's okay, or no, you got to move? So what is it that you give as advice to founders?
So I think at a very, very early stage of the company, it is all about running experiments. It's about listening to the consumer, like a lot of folks on the panel also pointed out. I do not particularly prescribe to the idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it, because I think unless you run too many experiments early on, so not too many experiments, but enough experiments to get your product right, as well as the customer segment right, and keep as the company evolves, as the new users enter into the system, you keep revisiting your PMF. And it's a very obvious choice. I mean, it sounds very obvious, but it's actually very hard to keep, revisiting the PMF and actually convince the founders to keep doing that, and the founders listening to you and actually running those experiments and doing that. I think it's very much important to stay relevant, because that's where you stay relevant, right? If you're not open to listening to the consumer, if you're not open to having feedback, like Walid also mentioned, if you're not looking at the analytics enough, it's difficult that you'll be able to build a product which will be enduring product for a long time, which will keep evolving and which will keep remain relevant for the longer time. So I think a simple advice would be to keep running experiments, and while at the same time focus on things which are working, you keep doing that, but also be open to other ideas.
Great. Super. So thank you Vinayak, Ankit, Mustafa, Walid for joining us today. This is a part 3 of a series of webinars that we did on building products that consumers love. Prajit, over to you for final comments, and thank you Hatch and BOV for us to partner together in bringing this series out. Pradeep, you're on mute.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Latika, and the rest of the panel. It's very insightful, very engaging, and it's really, I mean, there is so much to share about what we can all do together in the startup ecosystem. I mean, we're creating the whole world is seeing a new civilization now that being driven. At least that's how I see it. Being driven by startups and betting on the future, and there is so much we can share that to make our pursuits more successful and more efficient, and share the wisdom that we all learn from our own experiences, mistakes before successes. So thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for the whole panel.
Thank you, everybody. On behalf of BOV Capital, I'd like to thank Ankit, Walid, Mustafa, and definitely Latika and Randula, who have been our partners for the program. I'd like to leave with one note, which I share Walid's sentiments in terms of keep your eyes and ears open, and that has never changed for generations to come. Your customer, I always tell people, please know what your customer is having for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because that's very important, because then you understand your changing trends, you understand your customer trends in terms of the changing patterns, and I think that's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned as well. So thank you again. Thank you all.